Hello and welcome back to episode 6 of the C-Suite Cyber Podcast. The C-Suite Cyber Podcast enables C-Suite executives to make security-informed decisions. So what do we got today, Mike?
Yeah, we got a cool guy as a guest, our first guest. So that's a cool thing.
Yeah, he's hitting the vape like a cool guy.
So I wouldn't say cool guy necessarily.
He's nervous. That's all.
Never nervous.
Yeah, so we'll chat with him. We'll be talking about quality assurance, ensuring you get pretty much the most out of your program. High quality. How do you ensure that? How do you keep improving? How do you measure that? So we'll be having those kind of conversations and exploring that topic today. Cool. So we'll go ahead and knock out the ad, and then we'll dive into introductions, and then we'll chat. How's that sound?
Cheers to advertisements.
Cheers. All right. So this episode is brought to you by Tandem Cyber Solutions, our solid advertisement partner here. But yeah, they're a go-to pen testing company, and they do things a little bit different than most organizations. So they don't want to be there just for the 1 week out of the year that you need a pen test. They want to be there with you all year round to help you find those vulnerabilities as they start to creep in to your network as you're making those changes. Just doing normal stuff. I mean, you introduce stuff, they're there to add that sanity check, make sure you're planning and implementing with security in mind, so you don't have those vulnerabilities sitting there for 11 months until your next pen test. So for more information, go check them out at tandemcybersolutions.com/C-Suite Cyber. All right, cool. Let's dive in, AJ.
Cool. So today we have our special guest, DJ, Mr. Dale Jones himself. DJ, I don't have your full bio because you submitted it late, but I know you worked at NIWIC with Mike. You've worked in a bunch of different functions, and one of those functions was actually leading a quality assurance team. So what else, I guess, should we know about your background, and then kind of explain what quality assurance is?
Yeah, definitely. Just jack of all trades, master of none. Really got my interest in cybersecurity at a very young age. My dad was involved in it, handed me a programming book at 16. I, of course, neglected to read that book until the age of 19. At which point, I'd find out that, computer programming was really the foundation for, anything involving computers, obviously. So yeah, it took slow bloomer, late bloomer, whatever they call it. Takes me a little while to kind of put two and two together sometimes. But yeah, after that, just always had a strong interest in all things cybersecurity. Started working with Mr. Michael, where I got the opportunity to work in a number of different roles, to include vulnerability analysis, network security monitoring, hunt, system welfare availability technologies was a team I was on. And then I ended up leading a quality assurance program there towards the end. At a time when quality assurance wasn't exactly something that people were really familiar with, or
it's not sexy, is it?
Yeah, not at all. Process improvement, lessons learned, stuff like that, people don't really care about, even though that's really important and almost essential to any organization's ability to evolve in terms of their SOC program. So yeah, no, quality assurance is super important. I think it gets conflated with the idea of quality control. I feel like in cybersecurity, we tend to kind of lump quality control mechanisms in with the quality assurance aspect of things. So, quality control is more or less measuring the product after it's been created. Quality assurance is more or less proactive. So trying to kind of anticipate things. But it's all feedback loop, you know what I mean? You need quality control to feed into your quality assurance program and vice versa. So, yeah, really excited to be here. Can't wait to talk about some of this stuff. Definitely been a passion of mine, cybersecurity, I would say, for quite some time. So, quality assurance specifically.
Yeah. A lot of people forget about that feedback loop. I mean, it's missing so many organizations.
The OODA loop.
Yeah, the OODA. Yeah, that's the programming loop. But yeah, I mean, it needs to be there. What we need to do, AJ, before we forget, we need to introduce ourselves instead of halfway through the podcast, like we did a few episodes ago. So why don't you go first? So yeah, that was DJ, and also I want to point out we're in the new studio. Charleston studio. Boom, boom, boom. It's going to get better. But yeah, go ahead, AJ.
No, it's pretty amazing as it stands right now, just so it's known.
Yeah,
This
so
is what makes it amazing.
I don't have any fun pictures behind me, but give me a few weeks when I move, and then maybe I'll have something. I'm AJ, so I started cybersecurity in the Air Force, direct converted into cyber warfare, where I worked at the AFCERT and ended up on Counter Cyber after running a bunch of different missions. Basically, we were the team responsible for killing anything if there was something on the Air Force network. I also started the hunt team while I was there with my former supervisor, and that was very fruitful. And then left and pursued money and have bounced around a couple of different teams. Hunting, doing exercises, and now I work in threat detection. So the other side of the stuff that Mike puts together and hits us with.
Yeah.
Now I'll say something. Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you embellished the whole, cyber operations and threw the word killing into it, like that was necessary. But I just had to point that out. Sorry.
His intro always makes me feel inadequate.
Right, yeah, exactly.
We
Like,
worked at
how do you
different
follow that? Like,
places.
how do you follow that?
I'm gonna start going
stuff
first.
on the network.
Yeah, I'm gonna start going first.
One of our branches had to rebuild their network, the other did not.
Got it.
Exactly.
My name's Mike. I gotta follow this crap.
My name is Jeff.
Yeah. Gotta follow both of these two cool guys here. Just bounce around the blue and red sides of cybersecurity. I just like solving problems. I mean, I tell people that, and they look at me like I'm weird, but that's what I like to do. It doesn't really matter what it is. It just should be new and interesting, and I'd figure it out. I've spent time doing some forensics, malware analysis, incident response, pen testing, a little bit of red teaming, a little bit of purple teaming, a little bit of R&D. So I have fun hanging out with these two cool guys. Yeah. All right. So those are our intros. So let's get this boy going.
Let's dive into it.
So let's start with the problem statement, which is we'll start with the SOC. So I mentioned this, like, this is probably going to be a little SOC heavy because all of our backgrounds we interact with them a lot. But what problem crops up in these environments that QA type roles or QA type processes rather would solve or help alleviate some of that friction in the whole cybersecurity program?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we were to kind of break it down in terms of basic SOC operations, you have your basic functions of detection and response. So a lot of the QA focal points will be surrounding around those things. So things like mean time to detect. So for instance, the amount of time that it takes for an event to be determined to be an alert, to get and become a case within the case management system in front of an analyst. Those are types of things that you really want to kind of take some time to measure and get an understanding of. So I mean, that's just mean time to detect, mean time to respond. So these could be anything from the amount of time that it takes for an analyst to respond or triage an alert, all the way to the point of containment of, whatever mitigation steps are being deemed necessary for that particular investigation. Those are all things that have to be kind of taken into consideration. You can kind of get into more granular detail with things from the sense of how it can inform you regarding your technology stack. So how long, event ingestion takes, for instance, for your technology pipeline. So when it comes to your data actually being ingested and how long it's taking before it actually gets into your SIEM, and then from there, how long it takes before it actually makes it into the case management system. Those are all obviously in our nature. What do we do? Seconds count. So, You know what I mean? The amount of time that it takes for someone to actually look at something is obviously something we need to know about. And if there's any way we can improve that, then, obviously let the data drive the story and figure out improvements from there.
So when does the problem start cropping in that process? So those sound like great metrics that we should be looking at. But say a SOC has been stood up at a relatively new company, so they're slightly immature. We'll say maybe 5-person SOC, right? At what point will they start seeing problems? They're like, oh, we should probably start looking at QA as an option to solve these problems. Like, what would that problem be? What would that indicator be that they need to take a closer look at their processes and start integrating that feedback loop that is QA.
I think the metrics definitely kind of plays a role in kind of determining where your focus area needs to be. But I would say from the onset, obviously there's situations when it comes to your actual analyst capabilities, for instance. So if there's certain things that you should be training, for instance, that's a good way to kind of inform some of that. For us to kind of give you some anecdotes, I guess, what I think really prompted it for us was we got to a point in terms of, and I won't name any names in terms of organizations, but we got to a point where there were a number of incidents that took place that just left a really sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, just because there were fundamental issues in terms of our ability to report properly. Just really the foundational processes and procedures weren't necessarily being prescribed to, things like that. Standards weren't being upheld. And that's really what kind of prompted the necessity for the QA program, was because it wasn't being necessarily done in a way that was actually improving anything. It was more or less becoming a checkbox. So, for a lot of folks, if they prescribed any type of, framework or anything like that, lessons learned, stuff like that is something that comes up. But for a lot of folks, they ended up just treating it as a checkbox. We met afterwards. We talked about things, done and over with. So that's really what prompted for us. In terms of a new SOC, that like a startup, for instance, it really kind of depends, I feel like, on the maturity of the organization. Obviously, given the benefits we've seen from a QA program and what it can have, it would be something that an organization would definitely want to consider. But it may be something that, you would have to kind of have data points to drive it, if you will. And every organization, when they first get started, they're going to have growing pains. They're going to have areas of improvement.
That's with everything though, right?
Yeah. So implementing a QA program from the onset would be a good idea, just to start getting those data points, getting your foundation baseline established, and then being able to kind of actually start looking at it holistically. That would kind of be my take on it. That could very well be different, in terms of what problems that we can anticipate. But yeah, just lack of training, for analysts, not being familiar with the environment, for instance. I know a number of MSSPs probably experience this, where they end up going into an organization that they're not necessarily familiar with, and they have to get a spin up period, if you will. And so it's definitely one of those things. If you already have it kind of integrated into your SOC operation, it makes things a lot easier in terms of making good, data-driven, informed decisions regarding your business and improving things.
Informed decisions.
Yeah, God forbid.
That's a good word.
It's a weird one.
So it sounds like basically these organizations have a plan or some kind of structure to how they should be doing things. And they get put into the game, they're up to bat multiple times and they strike out.
Mm-hmm.
Or it just doesn't look pretty at all. And multiple times it occurs and you're like, okay, hang on. Let's put a pause on this and let's try to figure out where the issues are and let's try to solve them. So that's
right.
Yep.
I think it depends, right? Because if you're starting a new organization, if we took us three plus two others at our level, right? We all kind of know what our baseline is. And I think that changes the game a little bit because, maybe I excel in one area, whereas Mike excels in Windows, DJ excels in network or something. And so you can rely on those people. But the general baseline is anything level 1 or 2, we should all be able to work. Whereas if you're a team of 5 in this scenario and you have one person who's senior, then the QA automatically falls on that one person, right?
That's
Assuming that there's any responsibility there, like if they're even thinking about that from the beginning, rather than kind of just letting stuff go and then being told that there's an issue retroactively from the client, which could obviously impact the business. So I think it depends, but I do think you could start it from the beginning if you had the necessary pieces. I don't think you have to hit a certain milestone in annual revenue or amount of bodies and seats before you can start the QA process.
Yeah, I guess in a perfect world, you're doing that from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like how we work, where we do something and we kind of, I would say all of us work from an entrepreneurial kind of base where we don't have to be perfect.
Correct.
And we just want to start implementing as soon as possible and work through the problems as we come across them. And that's really how programs should be done. It just doesn't happen that way, especially when they get bigger and you have a lot more moving pieces, it becomes more complicated.
Right.
But really, everyone should be doing that. Unless it's in a place where like, it's not my problem, the Spider-Man meme.
Absolutely. Everyone's pointing the finger at each other. No, I will say that when it comes to QA, it's supposed to be, I would caution any organizations feeling like they need to create or hire additional bodies to perform such a task unless they've scaled to a certain point.
Yeah.
Only because a lot of the QA processes and procedures that we were prescribing to and that we're trying to do should be integrated within the teams themselves.
Yeah.
Across the SOC operation.
Leadership should be doing it.
Each team should be performing some type of QA for their own piece of the pie, if you will. You know what I mean? The way I see SOC operations is just a system of inputs and outputs. And so if you've got your standardized inputs, you can almost guarantee that the output's going to be standardized. You know what I mean? And you can kind of have some control in that regard. Or at least, I don't want to say guardrails or anything like that, because then you start getting into like micromanagement territory. But, you know, and people hate that. But it's just trying to make sure that everything is moving accordingly. And it should just already be integrated into their team's fabric at that point. It should already be in part of their processes and procedures and workflows. But yeah, that's a conversation for another day.
You use this term inputs and outputs, and we can tell you've done some programming just with that alone.
Just a little bit.
The world is binary to DJ.
100%. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that we're all just computers ourselves. So we're just output devices ourselves.
Simulation theory.
Yeah.
Conspiracy podcast now.
Uh-oh.
DJ, could you break down I know you kind of touched on this in the beginning, but can you, I guess, draw the line between quality assurance and quality control in a scenario with we'll go with the SOC, right? And maybe their fundamental analysis is the issue. So what part is quality control and what part is quality assurance?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, honestly. I think quality assurance really comes from the idea of laying out standards. I think for a lot of folks, they have an issue, or for a lot of leadership, they kind of have a tendency to ask for things, but they don't exactly know what they want. And so the important factor with that piece of it is just making sure that you have standards in place. And so from a quality assurance standpoint, having those standards in place so that you can measure up whatever the product is, so that you can actually make a determination if it's meeting standards, for lack of a better phrase. Quality control comes from actually comparing the product that's produced to the standards that you had kind of laid out from a quality assurance standpoint. And so that would be really kind of taking a look at an analyst, just a case triage, for instance. You know what I mean? What we would typically do is like batch sampling. And so we would just go through and actually just select, 5 out of 100 or whatever the metric may be, to kind of get good coverage. And we would try to vary it based upon different alert types and things like that, just so we got a good, variety in terms of being able to look at what needs to be done. But yeah, from a quality control standpoint, it'd be measuring all those cases and everything that you pull to whatever the standard was and seeing if it met that bar, ultimately. But the quality assurance is just, again, laying out what quality is supposed to look like to begin with. And so that was one thing that I've always been very adamant about too with the quality assurance program, is that this is meant to develop the organization and isn't meant to use it to identify ways to get rid of people or to be used in any punitive means.
That's a fine line too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It really is, because people, I think that's a knee-jerk reaction is people have a tendency to just take data and run with it without contextualizing it properly, right? We've had those discussions, I'm sure, so many times at this point. But yeah, being able to contextualize things is super important when it comes to any quality assurance that we're doing. But yeah, to answer your question, quality assurance would be the standards, and then quality control would be kind of measuring up against those standards.
So let's dive into this a little bit. And I know from personal experience, because I helped build a training program, that some of your stuff was supposed to keep in line there. But it's difficult. How do you, what's your perspective on creating standards that are appropriate for a large set of people? Because the difficult part of people is that, well, we're people, we're humans, we're not computers. So we all have different ways we approach problems.
Right.
We have different levels of skill sets, right? You have entry level analysts all the way up to senior level analysts. So when you're thinking about standards that people should abide by, how do you develop those knowing all that's there. And so you're not restricting your senior people from doing their thing, which is, hey, we want you to run with stuff. We want to empower you to do your thing, versus a younger person or a more junior person where here's some stuff to get you on the right track because we know you don't know what you're doing yet. And we'd want to help develop you a little bit. So with that in mind, like, what's your approach? Like, how do you balance all those needs with such a diverse set of skill sets and people there?
Oh, dude, yeah, no, it's definitely a tough uphill battle when it comes to that, because one of the things that we really encourage in our industry, obviously, is using your brain. So we want people to think. And the last thing we want to turn people is into a bunch of robots. You know what I mean? Just going through a checklist.
Playbooks, right?
Yeah. No, that's a conversation for another day. I mean, I can see the benefits of both.
So hang on. Raise your hand if you like the idea of playbooks.
Yeah,
like is such a strong. I was gonna say like is such a strong word. I mean, I don't.
No, don't raise it.
No. I don't dislike it. Like I don't dislike the idea. I just, as you guys know, when it comes to ideas, the implementation of those ideas is what's really important.
Yeah.
And so if we are unable to create a sustainable system, you know what I mean, that supports it in a way that it makes sense, then I think that's when you start running into problems.
So let's take a step. Who wants to define what a playbook is real quick?
Oh,
because we said that. So AJ and I have been trying really hard to make sure we're defining some of the terms we use, especially that could have broad interpretation.
Fair.
Yeah. Do you want to give playbooks a shot, AJ?
Sure. So I call them standard operating procedures, just military term probably, but playbooks sound dumb, and then now different tools have playbook as a term rather than something else. So anyways, basically it is a set of things that should be used to guide, and I'm put emphasis on guide, in this case, an investigation for a particular event or tactic, we'll say. So if I'm looking at a credential dumping type of scenario and I go to the credential dumping playbook, it's probably going to say, identify where the user logged in. Was the dump successful? Is there like a DMP file? Is there Mimikatz on the box or whatever, blah, blah. And then after this activity, did the account log into somewhere else? Now, those things are great to look for. But again, going back to what DJ mentioned, we should be able to use our brains. We should be able to pivot. This is not hunting. This is called pivoting. Emphasis there for a particular reason. To look at other things that occurred in that same time period, right? Maybe they tried credential dumping, it failed, so then they dumped cookies and connected via the browser to a portal that the person uses that contains customer information. If you just follow the playbook, you would never identify that the cookies were dumped and then utilized. So there to guide you, not end all be all. That's my breakdown.
Yeah, I think the problem with in where it gets organizations in trouble is they say we develop this playbook and we expect everyone to do exactly what it says or you're wrong. And that becomes the problem, right? Because like you said, when you develop them, they're there as a guide, but they don't handle every situation.
Precisely.
So like in the military and the infantry, I think it was 7-8 was our manual. And that tells you everything you're supposed to know as an infantryman. This day, how to react to ambushes, how to react to direct fire, whatever it is. But it's only a base. Things are different, right? When it's actually happening.
Yeah.
And you need to adjust to stay alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's really what it should be like with these playbooks, right?
Right.
This is a guide for junior people. It's fantastic because they don't know shit, right? Junior people don't know nothing. That's what the playbooks are
junior,
for.
yeah.
Right. That's what they're there for, I think, primarily.
Right.
Unless it happens to be something a more senior person doesn't specialize in, maybe.
Correct.
Right? Because typically we have endpoint people, and that could be Mac, Linux, Windows. We have network people. And then even the network people are broad. Yeah. We have some people that can tear packets apart all day. You have some people that can just understand flows and to develop algorithms to look for specific types of behaviors across the board.
Absolutely.
But yeah, they're meant there to be a guide and to help supplement people who are struggling with that particular thing.
I think that's the key. This word right there is just the idea of supplement. Yep. So I think for a lot of newer analysts, though, if you don't kind of give them that conversation or that talk about content versus context, they could very easily get trapped into the idea of just prescribing to those instructions. You know what I mean? And they could, like AJ was saying, could very well miss something that an adversary did, just because. And then eventually, like I said, and at that point, you're creating muscle memory, right?
Yeah.
So this analyst sees this alert over and over again. They've gone through the steps that were prescribed and laid out that says it's benign authorized. And before you know it, we've got an incident on our hands. So it's just one of those things where it's like, as long as it's framed properly and that we've had that conversation with new folks, that they know how to use the tools, right? That's one of, I think, the key issues that I have with a lot of places is, people go get all these certifications and it's just like, the technology stack that you use for a certification may very well be different from the technology stack that you're going to get exposed to in another environment.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. In programming, the syntax is largely the same. You learn concepts like object-oriented programming, concepts and things like that. Translates largely across all the other programming languages, but it's still, you still have a certain flavor that you have to there's a learning curve there. You know what I mean? That takes a spin-up period, if you will. So it's just making sure that we're training, when it comes to like the tools, you know what I mean? We're careful about that piece of it.
Yeah. EJ hates junior people also, just so you know.
It's awful.
Because you probably didn't listen to episode 5 where he said he wanted to replace every junior person with machine learning. Artificial intelligence.
Wu-Tang is for the children, man. Wu-Tang is for the children.
I don't want to. It is a possibility, and it is a very likely one at that, even in our space. But there's 2 things I want to call out before I forget. One, going back to the playbooks piece, if you think about it, the playbook is only as good as the person that wrote it. So if someone is in the mindset that DJ just described, where maybe they were junior and they've looked at this event 100 times, right? They always close it, benign authorized, but they've never looked at the overall picture. They've never looked 2 to 5 minutes on either side to actually see all the rest of the activity. And they write a playbook because that's based off of their perception and their understanding. Then that could ruin the other people that come into the organization that then use that playbook and rely on that playbook because Joe Schmo wrote it like an asshole and it's not good. Another thing that I want to call out is, and I'm probably going to forget this, but
I was fixing your camera so you're in frame a little bit.
That
you're like, oh,
yeah, no, I'm chilling.
Playbooks need to be updated, right? And this is something that, same with detections, same with tactics and techniques and all this other jazz that's in our world. All this stuff needs to be updated on a periodic basis, and that'll obviously vary depending on what we're looking at. But something could be right today, and then a year from now, it's incorrect. It's where it used to be in this table of CloudTrail, but now it no longer exists there, and it's in this version of CloudTrail. And so we now have to go rewrite our entire detection because it wasn't triggering because, surprise, the data doesn't live there anymore.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are, there's 2 things. One, I want to bring up that what I've seen a lot are that playbooks are developed not by senior people a lot of times, and they're not developed where there's enough knowledge that they can handle some of the nuances that may come in play.
Right.
So let's say, let's do something pretty common. Let's say dumping LSS, right? That's a pretty common technique used to escalate. Escalate privileges, lateral movement. It still falls in there across the domain. Anyways, I'll stop being technical. The point is, you can do it in a lot of ways, right? Some people may say, like you were talking about earlier, we're looking for a dump file. But a dump file is only created because the person that wrote the program told it to put it into a dump file. Right? What if I took that and immediately exhaled it across the network? I never put anything on the disk. Now, if the playbook is telling them to look for that dump file, it's never going to exist and they're always going to close it. I didn't see this indicator that this was it. So my point is, that's where junior people run into problems because they don't know what they don't know. Even though it's a guide, there's so many variations of every attack. And that's what I focus on when I do a lot of training. I want to show you lots of variations, and I want to show you and mess with your assumptions. That's what I like to do when I build training. I want to destroy your assumptions. I want you to think something's a certain way, and then I'm going to do it a different way because I know what you expect, because I have that blue side mindset. And I want to force people to think about the problems differently, to understand what you think is wrong.
Right.
Or it could be.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to present the way you think. It's like a doctor, right? They have all these things where certain illnesses present a certain, hey, you have high cholesterol, you have low vitamin D, whatever it is, you have this thing. But there are still variations where it doesn't necessarily present that same way.
Correct.
And we have that as well in what we do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's just having a healthy level of skepticism is super important to what we do. And it seems rather almost, I don't want to say evil, but that's something that you almost have to instill in analysts.
Yeah.
Is that you're going to see data and you're going to have to take it at face value, but then you're also going to have to question it and you're going to have to verify. You know what I mean? That's something we always talk about: validate, verify, always. Like, you know, whatever you're doing. So it's just something that, it's super important to what we do, is just having a healthy level of skepticism. I think healthy level because you can definitely get caught up and go down some rabbit holes and end up spending way more time triaging an alert that should have taken you a lot less time. But it happens to the best of us.
You end up like our friend who never kept the battery in a cell phone. It's overriding skepticism.
Right.
Yeah.
Been there. We've been there. We all been there, I think. We all been there.
Yeah, I mean, you want to have skepticism. I think the big thing too, the one thing that's different between the blue side and the red side, I would say, that I've found in my experience, is that the red side is happy to say, I don't know this, can you help me?
Right.
And I don't see that as much on the blue side, where they're confident, but they're typically overconfident in what they know.
I think that
and they don't have that spidey sense, or they don't have that thing that says, pause, I need to get someone with more knowledge in this area to take another look, to give me a second opinion.
I think that depends on the culture as well, right?
Yeah.
When I first went to Germany and like owned all of the European networks and stuff, my supervisor, his number one pet peeve was, I hate people who think who act like they know shit and they don't know shit.
Yeah.
So he would ask you questions and it'd be very nuanced, right? It's like, what's the Windows Event ID for AD replication successfully completed? I'm like fresh out of tech school, dude. I don't know. So like, but if you like made up an event ID and you were wrong, he'd be like, nope, you're a dumbass. Like, this is what it is. Now go write me a paper on what it is. And like just that mindset of, you know, hey, it's okay to ask for help and rely on other people. And I hate this terminology because I think a lot of organizations hide behind it, but like the whole one team, one fight thing, like at the end of the day, right, it's all a job. Unless it's your company, it's not one fight, right? Like, you're there to do a job, but you're not collecting all of the revenue. So like, who cares who gets the most tickets closed or whatever? Just do like the best you can to protect the organization, kind of thing. But we've definitely seen, all three of us, a place that doesn't doesn't facilitate asking for help. And I think that's evident because, Mike, when you and I were running exercises together and, you know, we ask, are there any questions? People wouldn't raise their hands. But as soon as the meeting's over, they'd slack us. Be like, hey, I had a question.
Yeah, they're scared.
And it's like, yeah. So but also that hinders the knowledge share between all the individuals.
Precisely.
And I think that's one thing, going back to the lessons learned that DJ mentioned earlier. Like, lessons learned, at least in my experience, right, is like, hey, we messed up, or hey, we learned something. We're going to tell it to everybody so everyone's on the same page, right? We're all going to grow from this experience so that hopefully the next time we encounter this, we know better. and how to like work it. I'm trying to build that. That's something that we've all built, like something as simple as this is how I find this activity. Someone junior might not know how to, parse something out in SQL or do something in Python or something that is repetitive for us senior folks. But for a junior person, they're either going to Google or they're going to spend time on ChatGPT if they're resourceful and try to build that out and then go to that. So I think that's definitely a culture issue and something that needs to be instilled from the top down, because I think it's really hard to push that bottom top.
Yeah, well, if you're pushing bottom top, you're missing out on the support structure that you need to do it. So whether that's additional training, time to do the thing you need to do, the patience to get stuff wrong and to build stuff out, because it takes time. It's not going to be perfect overnight. But yeah, you need that top-down approach. Hey, let's do this thing. Let's empower our people to do exactly what you said, which is, hey, you see something, maybe like me and you've done this before, where, hey, we've identified a new technique, but we go out of our way to knowledge share that information. Like, hey, this is cool. This is different. Let's do a blog post. Let's do a class on it. Let's build a lab so they can go out and so they can go and replicate it and understand this thing, so that we know it's not just in us. It's now been replicated in other people in the organization. But most people don't do that. Most people are like, oh, no. It's going to take way too much time to do. I got all these alerts I have to close out. I have this other stack of high priority work, and I don't have enough time to do it already. So screw this other stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just I think you kind of nailed it in regards to culture. I can tell you right now, just in my tenure as a people leader or, in upper management, with people coming in, that's one thing that newer folks across all organizations have a struggle with, is confidence. And what they don't understand is that confidence comes from those little wins of, falling forward, if you will. Like it's really
entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you have to, though. Like that's
I'm gonna weave this theme into this. Okay, no.
It's people they should really take that home, because you have to fall forward. If you're scared to fail, then you're not gonna do anything. You know what I mean? If you're scared to look dumb, I tell my people all the time, I was like, there is no stupid question unless it was a question you could have asked me 3 months ago. If you waited 3 months to ask me this question, yeah, I might get mad at you. I'm still gonna answer your question. But you could have, it took you this long to muster up the courage. No,
you were dumb. Now you're real dumb.
Right. Yeah. I don't know where that fear comes from. I don't know if it's just like certain personality types or something. You know what I mean? That just, because I don't know. I think we all went through it at some point in our career. I used to say it all the time. I hate relying on other people to do my job. And so I'm guilty of not being able to ask for help at times when I definitely needed help. But also those were times where I really got to learn about myself and really got to sink or swim, if you will. And I think that's some of my biggest career jumps, just in terms of knowledge and things like that, were as a result of those situations. So it's hit or miss, man. It's just understanding your people, understanding the culture, and figuring out a way to either change the culture or integrate certain aspects of that into your culture. You know what I mean? Encouraging people, telling them to ask questions, stuff like that. Really kind of break them out of old thought patterns in regards to, it's hard to even really determine where that comes from. You know what I mean? I was always one of those very curious types, so I didn't really care if I looked stupid. If I wanted to know something, I was going to ask the question. You know what I mean? It was just like, I could really care what anybody thinks. I need to know the answer. So I'm going to ask the guy that knows the answer. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think one way to combat that too is, if you do present something, regardless of the setting, is asking open-ended questions, or like asking them to explain what you just presented. I know even when Mike shows me stuff, like there's sometimes where I'll just zone out while he's talking, and I'll be like, wait, what is this doing? And then he'll be like,
I do the same too. Like, damn it.
What are y'all talking about?
Just like when we're like explaining stuff to him. Yeah, exactly. Damn. Got him.
There was one thing. So in the cert, I always thought this was weird, but now I guess it makes sense on some level. In the cert, we took our like best lieutenant, I think it was always a lieutenant, and put them in QA. And I was like, why did we do that? Like, you're taking your best operator out of the game. But it makes sense because they're the ones who were also writing our standards at the time. And so going back to like Mike, you were saying that, a lot of times the SOPs or the playbooks weren't written by the senior people. Like, that was who was writing our stuff. And
Lieutenant's not senior, first of all. Get out of here. That's
from the investigation piece.
Yeah.
Not
I don't
senior,
know, Lieutenant, I would follow in the combat.
Again, very different.
Shut up and stand in the back. We got this. Just don't get shot, sir.
Right, exactly. Put your head down there.
No, it doesn't work like that at the we don't care what you did at the academy.
Yeah, this is the same munition. No, but like they had been operating for over a year, and like they had been there long enough that like they knew the ins and outs and stuff. Okay. They were shortly promoted to captain, but like our weapons officer was a captain, so they were never going to be.
So they already have like a few years experience. They're not like fresh, like butter bar type people. No, we call them butter bars.
Yes, we did too.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not that different. Okay.
Hey, I don't know.
But yeah, so I guess what are you guys' thoughts on that? Because on one hand, you're taking someone who could be contributing to the overall workload out of the game, but on the other hand, they might be the most well equipped in order to kind of beef up the standards that others should be held to.
I like the idea of a rotational program, I think.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I like to teach. I like to build training, but I don't want to fucking do it all the time. I need to get back in the weeds and do stuff.
Correct.
But I like to think I do decent training, and I like to see people grow and stuff like that. I got to get back and do my thing where I'm building myself up, right? I just don't want to keep giving to other people. I need to continue to grow myself because that's what I actually like about what I do is getting better and growing. But I like the idea of that because you'll get fresh insight if you do like maybe quarterly rotation or something like that. So you can take a senior guy and say, maybe you're in charge of QA, now you're in charge of training, and then you're in charge of whatever, however you want to break down that rotation. But have some, so they don't get burned out either, because some of that stuff, especially QA is so tedious. QC is so tedious. Writing playbooks, writing SOPs every day. Oh my God, it's as bad as compliance, man. And none of us want to do compliance for a reason. And it's just that bad. But if you did it in a rotational basis, they're not going to get burned out. Right. You're going to get the right people there doing it, and you're going to get that fresh perspective as well.
Absolutely.
I think. I don't know. What do you think, or do you have alternative perspective?
No, I think you kind of nailed it. The rotational program is definitely kind of needed because I think for a lot of us, and one thing I'll say too is it's really about culture, going back to fostering that culture of teaching and learning. You know what I mean? Sharing knowledge, tribal knowledge being shared across the organization. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's something that you have to be super aware of. You know what I mean?
So what is tribal knowledge real quick? Because this is a huge thing that a lot of organizations get themselves into. What is tribal knowledge?
And knowledge that you're going to acquire while you're on the job. You know what I mean? Little nuances.
Why is it a bad thing?
Because once people leave, it becomes a situation where that knowledge goes with them, especially if you don't have a situation where you're enforcing them to document things like that. Or you haven't built the culture to support that at this point. So yeah, tribal knowledge is huge.
Yeah. And you couple that with the turnover rate that we have in the industry.
Right.
And now you have a cancer waiting to take over. You just have all these senior people, you build them up, you have that tribal knowledge, and then boom, 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 they just start leaving.
Yeah.
Because I had a project I bid on recently, all their senior people left in the SOC, and they needed someone to come in and build all the processes, train their junior people, document everything, because that's exactly what happened. All the people left. All that knowledge is gone. Now it's a barren desert. And they need to do something now. They can't operate.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's organizations tend to do that to themselves, though, by not creating that situation, a scenario where you're kind of fostering that learning, teaching culture. what I try to tell people, I like to plant seeds in a lot of my newer folks when they come on board, to instill confidence. So I tell them, you're new to this team, so you bring a fresh perspective, like you were talking about, you bring fresh insights.
Yeah.
So you're going to ask questions about stuff. And one thing that I've always kind of prescribed to is, I think it was a coworker of mine mentioned the root cause analysis, so the 5 why method.
Right.
So if you can ask for why 5 times, you know what I mean? Typically by that 5th why, you've got your root cause, and you'll be able to kind of solve and address the issues as needed. I don't know where I was going with that. Just a bit of a tangent. I felt the need to mention that. So when it comes to planting seeds and trying to get that to foster into your culture, some of the things that I tell some of my newer folks too is just 90% of what you teach, you retain. You know what I mean? There's some type of study or something that was done on that, or, in terms of memorization and things like reading, writing, all that stuff. But 90% of what you teach, you actually retain. So I think the rotational program would be a good way to kind of create that culture and just kind of integrate it directly into your staffing plan. You know what I mean? To where it's kind of forced upon people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the rotational program would probably be your best bet if you were to try to offset that situation in terms of having a senior person, being your person that you call on when you need them, but also kind of having that perspective that's needed to provide the insight for the standards to continue evolving, and developing analysts and things like that. So it's a push and pull. It all goes back to kind of the maturity of the organization and how many resources you have to kind of spend on it. I think I would encourage anybody though to really take a hardline look at that and make sure training is a priority, because the last thing you need is a bunch of unskilled labor that you're paying for and not getting anything out of them.
See, that's why you replace them with AI, bro.
No, we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, okay. I'll back up and say that if you don't have individuals that are capable of critical thinking, then yes, that is most certainly an option.
Okay, hang on. Let me ask DJ a question. I'm going to put him on the spot because AJ's answered this. We know it's 100%. What percentage of your junior staff in the SOC did you replace with AI?
That's fucked, dude. I don't know. We'll go 69%.
Yeah, say a little 69, yeah. So there you go. You can replace a majority of your SOC.
You said junior staff specifically.
And that's the majority of the SOC, isn't it?
What SOC? I don't know what SOC we're talking about.
Yeah, all kidding aside, I mean, AI can do a lot. I look at it as a workforce augmentation. So it's never going to completely erase the need for people, but it's going to enable them to work faster.
Correct.
And better.
Correct.
But they still need a foundation.
Yeah. I mean, the idea behind AI being able to allow an analyst to quickly deduce something, reduce the number of clicks an analyst has to experience during triage, that's all stuff that I think is definitely worth looking into. But the key aspect though, AJ, is that we're not at that point yet with it. I say yet though. So maybe in another 10 years, we'll be able to replace the wonderful thing known as the human brain with artificial intelligence. But at this point, it's still got a little ways to go.
I think that's debatable because we're focusing on junior talent specifically. But that's okay. That's another topic.
So I kind of want to explore that a little bit more though, because I'm curious though, do you remember when you were a junior?
Yes.
So he was flawless as a junior.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, you were killing
not
on the network. So, I mean, but no, you get what I'm saying though. It's just like everyone has to start from somewhere. And so I think that if you were to create a situation where AI were to replace a junior analyst, how do you bridge that gap from a junior becoming an intermediate or an expert? You know what I mean? Like how would you offset that?
Okay, you go first, and I'm going to say something very controversial.
All right, this might be on the same line, but very easily.
You controversial. So bad.
One very easy answer to that question would be they would work for a company that doesn't have the ability to afford or implement such AI. Another thing would be, like Mike said, he touched on it but didn't go into detail. They get to focus on different problems, right? So sure, you still start junior. However, the bar is raised because your knowledge is raised, because you've reviewed cases that have been analyzed and investigated by AI. So instead of coming in and working I don't know, like someone going to a bad domain identified by the proxy, right? Now you're starting and looking for lateral movement. Like your bar to entry is raised, and therefore your education is raised, and so you're kind of shifted. Mike, your take?
Yeah, so I will continue to expand on that and make it even more controversial. I think cybersecurity should go the way of other professions like lawyers and doctors, where the expected level of education is much higher than it is now. And the point would be you have that foundational knowledge where we're not teaching these basics. Like both of you answer this. How many times have you gotten a person on the job or done interviews and they allegedly had 2 or 3 certifications, yet they lack the security plus foundations, like those basics. They're still missing even though they have these certifications, and you're teaching that on the job.
I mean, you've got 19 certifications, and I feel like you still lack. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding, guys.
Don't ask me to analyze a packet anymore. That one's gone.
Oh yeah,
come on, no.
I could not give you a subnet.
Yeah,
I would definitely have to use a subnet calculator.
Just Google. I was gonna say, like,
how many IPs are in a /24, AJ?
254.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. First and last one are usually reserved. Yeah.
Anyways, yes, it's been several times. I think that also, highlights recruiting efforts and all that other jazz. And just we've talked about this before. Some certifications, you study to pass the test. There's no real world activity.
You don't retain it. Yeah.
Yeah. Most of the certifications that I have previously had were those types. I think we should focus on experience rather than education. And I think, especially in our industry, that shift has been realized more recently.
Yep.
Not to say that education is not.
Because AJ doesn't have a bachelor's. He has 2 associates.
Not telling people.
This also came out in the last podcast.
Hey,
it was so informative.
That's one more associate's degree than I got. So I mean,
okay, we're cutting
this
this
my
out.
bachelor's, but we ain't cutting any of this out.
So I have a question then. Based on this math, do I have a doctorate? Because I have 2 bachelors and an associate and a graduate certificate. So am I a doctor?
Are they all in the same field?
Well, one's business, one's information technology, one's ethical hacking, and then I got a general science associate. It's just
no. So you can combine the.
Man, no, you're just you're good, bro.
No, because they're different fields. Mine was literally IT and cyber systems. Like that's.
Well, you could look at the business as executive training.
Sure, I would say you have an MBA, but not a doctorate.
I'm actually like a few classes away from an MBA, probably.
You have a real world MBA. You run a company,
right?
Yeah, fair.
That's besides the point.
I got 134 credit hours. I still have my bachelor's, so that's
I suck at running a business. I guess I need a doctorate in that.
Now, bachelor's overrated. College degrees overrated.
Yeah.
Oh, that's controversial.
Well, it is controversial. But I would say my point is that I feel like the people coming into cybersecurity need to have a higher level of knowledge before sitting in a seat. Mm-hmm. Because what it does, and I'll tell you why, it eats up our time so much as senior people when we need to get them to cross that threshold where they're useful, right? We're investing so much time before people are useful.
Weren't you in support of the rotational programs when this came up in our other episode?
Yeah, I am. But the good people, I like the good people that came through. But yeah, I mean, that's why it's conversation. Like, there are good people like you, right? You're stupid, but you've been so successful. I'm kidding. But
shout out to the boys.
Shout out to the boys.
Yeah, like there's a lot of people who don't have that. They got that experience, and it's usually that curiosity, right?
Correct.
That one trait is what makes you and AJ and me unique from a lot of people in our field is we're curious, and we're not just going to take that surface answer for anything.
There you go.
It's like, I want to understand why. This has got to fit into my understanding of the world.
Correct.
Somehow.
I need to have a frame of reference. Yes.
Yes. And I won't stop until I get that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is controversial, but I think it's going to move that way. Maybe not all the way to where like a lawyer or doctor, but I think it is going to get the requirement. It's already getting that way because the number of openings is so low for entry level people now.
Right.
And just more senior people in general. Like it's so difficult for people to find a job now. So I don't know. It's a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just my thing is I'm a people person, surprisingly. I know you will probably never hear in a million years you hear me say that. But for me,
you before,
yeah, fair. No, it's just to me, it's
Jay before you and me.
Like I can think back through my journey so far and just rack off a few different mentors that without their guidance, mentorship, teaching style, I wouldn't have gotten to the point to where I'm at. So I really feel like what you just said, that key personality trait of being curious, you can instill that into people if you build a program.
I think you can instill it. I haven't crossed that threshold to believe that yet.
Fair.
So you think you can instill curiosity?
I feel like you can. I feel like if you, well, to an extent, right? So I mean, not necessarily natural innate curiosity, but the ability to observe or look at something in a way that almost simulates curiosity, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So again, like I feel like when we talk about curiosity, I'm just thinking about being able to think for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like that's a fundamental trait that a lot of people don't have nowadays, is that they just rather regurgitate, you know what I mean? This goes back to our education system, and we could talk about Henry Ford and the Industrial Revolution if you want to get on those topics and stuff like that.
Let's do it.
No, it's just the idea that people are so used to just regurgitating stuff that's fed to them. And so to me, as contrarian,
that's our education system in the US. Yeah.
And so what my thing is though is how do we counteract that? Do we address the symptom, or do we actually attack the problem? And to me, you know what I mean? By leveraging AI, we're definitely addressing a symptom of a larger problem that I think eventually we're not going to be able to outrun. You know what I mean? So I feel like we talk about layers 8, 9, and 10, right? People, politics, and money.
I have not heard this before. What?
Really? Yeah. So
what are the rest of the layers?
Right. Oh, it's not model, right? Yeah. We don't want to get Jesus. We don't want to get into too many of the weeds.
No, what are the 1 through 9? What are
because that's data, right?
So this is like the network stack, but you're replacing the top ones,
right?
Okay,
it's just a general concept, but it's just zeros and ones, right? You know, data gets transferred; it's either on or it's off. Yeah. You know what I mean? Zeros and ones. When you start getting into like people, politics, and money, though, those are your aspects. Those are the things that are ever changing. Those are the data points that are more dynamic. Money is the
application layer here in this case.
If you want to call it that. I mean, if you want to extrapolate it, then, I mean, sure. But no, I think it's just eventually it's going to be a problem that we just can't outrun. You know what I mean? And the expectation of, so I mean, I just want to explore this further, because the idea of educating people versus not educating them and then expecting things to get better and just raising the bar, to me is very almost gatekeeping. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Counterpoint. Hold up. Let me interject this real quick.
Gatekeeper.
If I'm running a business and I can save money by implementing artificial intelligence to perform the role of 3 to 5 other people, I will always choose that because it is in the best interest of my company. Now, if I have this personality where I want to give back to the world and I'm trying to change everything for the better, then I might consider training and educating people over what is best for revenue and profits. I don't think, like, you're looking at it, again, you're binary. You're looking at it very black and white, right? But in the actual implementation, it's not my job as an employer to fix our education system in the U.S. Go vote. Change who you vote for. That's everyone's issue.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. But I think it's incumbent upon you in terms of your organization, if you're trying to have any sustainability or longevity. If you're looking at it from a short-term standpoint, absolutely. You know what I mean? More bang for your buck. I mean, more return on your investment. If we're just looking at numbers and the bottom line revenue returns each year, absolutely. Makes sense. But I think eventually you're going to reach a scale of your program to where that human element, you're not going to be able to just program. You're just not going to be able to outrun it. You know what I mean?
But I get more revenue, so therefore I have more money to hire more senior people to handle those problems later on down the road.
You guys and I both know that at this point we have more cybersecurity jobs than we have people to fill them.
That's not true.
When it comes to
most of those are false.
Talent, when it comes to actually finding talent, though, I mean,
there is a so this is a good point that both of them are talking about. So there, at one point, there was like millions of jobs unfulfilled. So that's what we're talking about here in the cybersecurity community. And then AJ mentioned that's not true. And he's saying that's not true because if you look, a lot of times they're just replicating the same position across different localities or just multiple times with different things in it, which is creating a not a misinterpretation, but a
it's disparity between like the data.
Disparity. That's a really good word for not having a bachelor's, man. Jeez.
He's not gonna let that go. He's not gonna let that go.
We're trying to make it.
Should have never disclosed that, AJ. Should have never disclosed it.
Yeah, but the point is, yeah. So yes, there are not as many unfulfilled jobs as people think. But I also want to point out that what you said is also true. There's a talent shortage, and there's a difference between unfilled positions and a talent shortage. There's probably plenty of people to fill these roles, but whether or not they're qualified or are going to do a good job once they get put into that seat, that's a whole different animal. And I think that's the problem, right? You were talking about the education system, how we can't change that. That's true. We're like pirates, right? We got to use the weapons we have on hand to fight the war. And so we have to figure out, we have all these people, how do we choose the right ones who have grown up in a failed education system to protect all these companies and adapt to the constant changing world that is cybersecurity, right? How different is it been in the last 5 years for what we've done? AI, boom, already it's changed the way we do stuff. So yeah, that was my point. That's all I got.
DJ, to circle back on your teaching curiosity, I agree with you that it can be taught, and I'll give a few stories there.
Yes, give me a story. Show me where it can be taught.
When I was to back up, I've always been somewhat curious, right? So I think I was 8, maybe 10 in that age range, and I stuck a fork in an outlet and it didn't do anything. So I jammed the fork in the outlet,
Right.
and I got shocked. Like I expected to get shocked, right? So stuck it in, nothing happened. Jammed it in, got shocked, got kicked off the wall. But later,
lesson learned, baby. Lesson learned.
Later in AP Bio,
this is my co-host, everyone.
Explains so much. It explains so much.
Listen, later in AP Bio, I had a teacher, and he said, like, question everything.
Disability. That's why I didn't make it through college.
Shut up. He said, question everything, right? And he even said, as far as like, question the things that I'm telling you. Just because I say something came out of a book doesn't make it true. And I think that's the one thing. Like I can still picture his bald head in the classroom, like saying this to us. And that is something that has always stuck with me because I was like, you know what? Who is this guy to just tell me that this is this because that's what he said? And then like, since then, a lot of things have changed in my life, obviously. But I think
have they though?
Have
they though? When's the last time you jammed a fork into an outlet? Just honestly.
Last week, no shit.
Yeah. I would point out too, like something I learned in training, like not in training, but as a trainer. There's only so much you can teach.
Yeah,
correct.
And if you're teaching every nuance, you're going to lose people so fast.
Oh yeah.
And so my point isn't that we can't teach everything. Well, it is kind of that point, but like when we're teaching, you're still missing out on stuff.
Right.
And so you have to have a way to balance that stuff you're doing. You need to be able to find people that can fill in those gaps and can understand, like you're saying, you got to think for your own. What I'm telling you isn't even the whole reality. It's like the difference between what you learn in high school and what you learn in college. A whole different history.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of how it is when we teach. We have maybe a day for me to teach you how to do temporal analysis properly across a endpoint and, I don't know, 10 different or 20 different types of logs and tools. Well, I can't teach you every variation. I'm going to be lucky just to get you to understand the concept of temporal analysis and start framing like how to do your analysis and maintaining and building a narrative while you're doing that, keeping that in mind. That's, and that's the problem. There's going to be so many gaps. We can't teach everything. And so, you need that curiosity. I don't know. I was going on a rambling there but curiosity.
You brought up a point that, and I'm going to butcher this saying, but it's very similar to like, if I give you something for free, you don't value it, right? Like if you teach me all of the answers, I don't value it because I didn't have to go and think through the problem and try and fail in order to get to the solution.
Right. Feed a man a fish versus teach a man a fish.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I learned too. I'm like, I want to give me the material first. Let me go through it and play around with it, and then teach me some stuff. And let me play with the material some more. And then, okay, let me ask some questions and hone in on these specific areas that I'm having issues with. But I need to keep going back and forth. I don't need you just to talk to me all day long. I'm not going to learn anything.
Right. And so, I mean, the more you guys talk, I kind of am realizing too, we have a tendency to kind of project how we think is how everyone else thinks.
Yeah.
And so, I think that there is a certain type of mindset that has to be already in place before you even kind of start learning cybersecurity, because there's so much to cover.
So you can't teach curiosity. Huh?
You can. I think it just comes natural to some people, right? Hard work always outworks talent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that I think that if you want to do something and you want to become good at something, you can. But for a lot of people, that want isn't strong enough. You know what I mean? That desire isn't strong enough. And so if
was he distracting you because he was typing?
Yeah, just a little bit. I had to pause for a second to see what's popping up on the chat.
I was distracted because I was looking to see if he was putting something in the Notion page. Like, what is he putting in there? But no.
I kind of lost my train of thought.
Yeah. So in conclusion, you can't teach curiosity
and be taught, but it is a rather difficult task, I would say.
Yeah. I think there has to be like a nugget there. Because you have some people that just don't care that much.
Right. This is a job, or whatever the case may be. They just want to do good enough. You know what I mean? They're content with that.
You got to like coax it out of some people and it's there. Some people it's just there.
Right.
You got to reel it in sometimes.
Yeah. And for those people, you just plant seeds, you know what I mean? And just kind of let it run wild. That's what I try to do, just plant seeds.
Because you and I have that problem where sometimes we're too curious and we have to balance like impact. In time with that curiosity, like, all right, I need to chill, rope it in, find a conclusion, find a stopping spot, and we got to move on to the next thing.
Dude, the rabbit holes, man, the rabbit holes, follow the white rabbit, you know, like you can't help yourself sometimes. And for me, it was always more or less because I was just trying to understand all the different aspects of something, you know what I mean? And so I think that that's something that analysts have to understand coming into this industry. Is that there's a great deal of information to go through and sort through to become effective. You know what I mean? Like, and you just kind of have to be prepared for that. I'm just trying not to come off as like condescending or in any way trying to turn. Right. Like, I don't want to turn anyone off from the industry, but it isn't.
Well, you had a really good point too to go back to where you were talking about. We don't want to assume everyone has the same mindset as us.
Right.
And that is very important because everyone thinks different. That's something else I learned a lot while being a teacher. My trainer is that not everyone learns the same way I do. I have to figure out how to teach for these people. I don't know how they learn. I just have an idea, but I can't get into that mindset because I'm not them.
Oh,
but we have that, and like even as leaders, we have that with different people. They need different things in order to grow, right? They're like different types of plants. Some plants you need to add sulfur to or ammonia or whatever, because they have specific nutrients, and that's what they need a certain type of environment, a certain type of response from you. Hey, great job, or hey, you should probably, more of a firm nudge. Hey, I want you to spend time doing this. Turn off your phone, turn off Slack, and just focus on this thing.
Absolutely. No, I think for a lot of people though too, man, and this is getting into some deep territory. I feel like just the idea of surviving versus thriving. So you get into the workforce, you know what I mean? You're a new person. That might be part of the reason why people's confidence is so shot, is because they're so scared of messing up, because that could lead to them getting fired, which their livelihood goes out the window. So it's like they're not going to risk their livelihood if it's going to, if in their head it's anyway going to jeopardize their life. You know what I mean? Then they're not going to risk anything by asking a stupid question or failing, if you will. So yeah, it's a huge issue, I think, for a lot of folks.
It's tough to do in the big corporate environments.
100%.
Different
personality types.
Yeah. Well, even with different types of, like, where they rank their people, like your things are very much in that, where they do massive layoffs or Facebooks or Google,
right?
Whatever the hell.
It happens all the time.
Google, and they just shred their people. And it's like, well, I really don't want to seem stupid. And they're recruiting top talent as is. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point too, the thriving versus surviving mentality.
Yeah. I think it creates a certain, when you're plagued with anxiety constantly, you know what I mean? Have you ever been in an anxious state? You can't focus on anything else. You know what I mean? You're only focused on whatever that's causing that anxiety.
Yeah.
So the idea of an analyst really kind of being able to pour themselves into a training or something like that without, depending on the circumstance in the company, you know what I mean? If that's the culture that's been fostered and they're in any way worried about that, could create situations where there's blockages and those neural pathways that would typically be forming don't have a chance to form, because their brain isn't even in a space to where they can necessarily, learn all the things. Some of it may stick, but a lot of it won't, you know what I mean? Because they're in a different mindset. So it's interesting, the psychology for a lot of that stuff, you know what I'm saying? But I feel like in terms of teaching somebody stuff, man, to me, it's just concepts and practical application of those concepts. Like, you have to have that. You have to be able to teach a concept and then have the practical application so that you can get the muscle memory behind it. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, teaching in forms of, again, whether it's lecture based, whether they're reading something, those are all different things that you can utilize to try to help reinforce some of that stuff. So I think to some extent you can instill some of that, but it's just, if you're going to be super successful in this industry, you just should be naturally curious. Honestly, I feel like, not to suggest I'm in any way super successful, but I am on the podcast with two individuals that happen to be very, very successful.
He's successful. The only successful people come on this podcast.
Very high.
High.
How do we define success? I think let's start there. When we're talking about defining
all have
terms,
our own version of success.
Right. Yeah, what does that mean? Like,
success is getting out of bed every day. No.
Dude,
some people, fuck yeah. You got out of bed today, winning.
Fucking hell yeah. I wake up grateful every morning, man.
No, I would say too, like, talking about stressors, certain stressors are good, I think. Like for me, right? And this isn't the same for anyone. I'm weird, and it's probably due to, like, I guess my trauma from the military, if you want to call it that. But I'm a high functioning, high stress person. So if you don't put me in very stressful situations, I don't thrive. If you put me in like a chill situation, I just kind of like whatever. Like I'm not that good. I don't get a lot done. But if you look, like, that's why I do this podcast. I have my business. I have a full-time job. I do all these things. I'm training for a marathon. I do these things because I have to add stress to my life to be successful and to keep being productive.
Absolutely. I know exactly what you mean. No. And again, not because I'm not by any means a licensed professional in any way, or, have a degree in psychology or anything like that. But what it sounds like to me is that you're addicted to chaos.
Engineer.
You are. It's just the idea of like war and peace, right? Yeah. Like we always talk about, even from a SOC perspective, to kind of tie it back into these concepts, but just from the standpoint of war times versus peace times. Obviously, there's certain processes and procedures, things that are going on during an active investigation. What happens when there's that peace time? You know what I mean? A lot of times people don't know what to do with themselves. And so to kind of look at it from a macro level for your life, you're just addicted to chaos, bro. Like that's your normal, that's your baseline. You know what I mean? And I think for us though, in this industry, you have to be that way almost because we're in a naturally reactive space. And so if you're not conditioned to react in chaotic situations, then yeah, you're going to come into this industry as a junior analyst and you're going to shit the bed the first couple times because you don't have any idea what to do because your brain doesn't, you know what I mean? Just blanks. Because yeah, you know, so it's like if you're not, yeah, I think cybersecurity is made for those of us that have been severely traumatized throughout our lives and that we're addicted to chaos. And that's why we thrive so much in this industry. I'm starting to realize things right now on this podcast. Like I'm really starting to put two and two together, connecting some dots, man, because I'm the same way, man. I've always considered myself to be a very good procrastinator. So I can wait to the last minute, even though I've had ample time, even when that thought of actually working towards that goal has crossed my mind several times up until that point. It's not until that fire gets lit underneath my ass to where I'm just like, you know, I hit the ground running and I can get shit done in 3 days, 4 days, whatever the case may be, 2 days. And so, yeah, I think it's just for us, it's just a natural state of being in chaos.
Yeah.
It's just home for us at this point.
I don't think it's necessarily chaos because like if you look at it from a muscle perspective, right? Like if you don't use it, you atrophy. You don't grow unless you're like actively stressing it. And I would say for people, like if you're not actively challenged, you're not going to grow as an individual. Now, you being a procrastinator, that's a different mental disability. That
I wouldn't consider it a disability. I consider it a superpower, to be honest with you.
You are just procrastinating as a superpower.
I just live in the present. I don't prescribe to arbitrary deadlines and artificial constructs of this real world that we live in.
No, it's not a disability, but I think that is different. And sometimes I'm the same way, like especially in school, and it's papers and stuff. You know, got like a month to write a paper, and then the day before you're writing an 8-page paper. But yeah, I think it's important.
To artificially create stress for me.
Correct. Same.
So like with my goals, I'll look at them and like try to build stress up and make it seem more like now I need to be doing this now.
Yeah.
And like trick myself into like prioritizing the goal versus procrastinating, as you say.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, it depends on what it is. You know, I'm pretty selective when it comes to what I procrastinate for the most part.
Like editing these videos, I have to build myself up to sitting back and rewatching it over again.
Oh.
I know.
Make Angel do it.
No, he's social media, man. I'm the
keep him from jamming any forks and outlets. Give him something to do.
Yeah, so I need to keep him away from outlets.
Listen, guys, I'm sharing anecdotes that apply to the current situation at hand.
So I have a question for you. And it's related to your future state and your past state.
So DJ?
So your future state is like a new house. So I'm curious, do you take a fork with you when you look at houses and test that? I get a better jolt in this house.
So to be clear, for those only listening on audio, that question was meant for me, Anthony. And no, I have outlets every 4 feet though in the new house. So I have ample opportunities. I could even, with my wingspan, I could even jam forks into 2 outlets at once to see if they cancel out.
Oh man, you should do it live on the podcast.
Have you seen?
Room for the pod.
Have you seen that guy on YouTube who his chat told him 2 toasters cancel each other out, and he like
no, I have not seen that.
Yeah, we gotta look that up later.
God help us.
We're gonna edit this out, so it's fine. But he shits himself.
No, I'm not editing this out at all.
He literally gets thrown.
Everyone will know you forks and outlets.
No, that's fine. But this part, he jams the 2 forks into the toasters, and you see it explode, and like his camera glitches for a second, and it throws him against the back wall, and his legs go up, and you can see that he shit himself. And he's like, "Guys, I think I just shit myself." I'll find that link. Don't worry.
Oh God!
I will tell you my favorite YouTube video of stupid people. It's like this, and he's playing like gunpowder and stuff on his table, and he sets it off, and it's just like, and his hair's just up, his face is back. Like, oh, I didn't know it was going to do that. It's just smoking at the kitchen table. I'm like, yeah, solid. It just makes me laugh every time. His face. This happened. I've done that with gunpowder. Like, not that big, but like, yeah, I wonder what this will do.
I mean, blowing shit up is just,
Yeah, that was military.
It's in our DNA at this point.
Yeah, you're on guard duty with big old 50 cal rounds full of gunpowder. You do stupid shit sometimes.
Might find a thing or two to do at that point.
That one scared the shit out of me too.
Too much.
There you go.
Too much.
Hey, 12-hour shifts, man. You got to find something to stay awake.
I was again tying this back. Natural curiosity. Natural curiosity.
Yeah. These are the people keeping your network safe.
Exactly. We blow shit up on occasion. We drink alcohol every once in a while,
People of chaos.
Agents of chaos.
Agents of chaos. That'd be a good shirt for our merch store one day. Agents of chaos.
Actually.
Chaos. DJ was talking about a merch store. I was like, maybe one day.
Yeah. Chaos engineering is my favorite title by far.
Yeah.
Penetration testing is always my favorite for obvious reasons.
You always get that giggle when you tell people that. They're like, what do you do? Penetration test. My cousin's going to be like, what? Flash. My cousin, so I have a cousin, she's an interior designer. She loves listening to our podcast while she works for whatever reason.
Awesome.
And so she always hits me up with questions. I have another cousin that's actually trying to break into cybersecurity now. She's in school. So both females, and they're going to have some interesting text messages whenever we release this episode. Unclear.
Nah.
That's fine.
This will save episode, I'm sure. Maybe you guys are going to rethink having featured guests on here after this one.
No, we've got a few lined up.
Nice.
We'll have you back on when my new studio looks nicer.
Yeah, I'll be down.
I need to get like a Matrix something or another.
Yeah. Oh, dude, Matrix. I've been rewatching.
I have like a replica of a John Wick coin. I hadn't had.
Fuck yeah.
I'll put it right here.
Wait, I gotta.
Yeah. Sweet. You know what I'm talking about? Like the coins they use and like the assassin. Yeah. Sweet.
I got a fun story. The lady who wrote Terminator also did The Matrix, and she did an interview where, I think it was the script, not the books. But she did an interview where she said it's pre and post. So like it's basically the story of Christ, if you will, where like beforehand they were told about John Connor coming and he would like do all these things, basically defeat the machines. And so that's why they sent the Terminators back. And then the Matrix is like him in the future where like all the robots have taken over and all that shit.
Whoa.
Interesting.
That's pretty fucking wild.
Right?
I've never heard that.
I thought it was bullshit, and then I Googled her name, and like she is tied to both projects, and I was like,
Wachowski?
Okay.
Yeah, that's wild.
Well, no, Wachowski, they
she was
didn't
just
write it, they directed it.
Right.
Yeah. When they did it, they were the Wachowski brothers. Now I think they're just the Wachowskis. Well, only one did the last Matrix, so I think actually.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was only one of them. Yeah, I think the Matrix is actually based on a book.
There's a graphic novel. I have it here.
Okay.
So I need to shelf cool books on it back there.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
But no, it only has short snippets. It's almost like the Animatrix, if you ever saw that.
Yeah.
I wish they did. It would be an amazing book series, I bet.
I have to look it up. I'll see if I can find it, but I want to say that there's very trace similarities between this book that was written in the 60s as well as the Matrix storyline. So I have to double check, but I'll get that link to you.
I did at one, so this is how nerdy I am. At one point I did, so they had a bunch of like required readings for the actors and actresses. And so I have some of those that I've read too. Very interesting. Some of it's just like philosophical text to get them in the mindset for the movies.
Yep.
For which movie?
I know The Matrix.
The Matrix.
Oh. There's that book that Neo has on his bookshelf where he's first hitting up.
Crown or whatever, where he keeps his.
That's in my Amazon library right now, actually.
Yeah, I have it here.
Oh, I'm going to borrow it from you, actually, then. I'd like to see if you don't mind.
All right, let's wrap this fucking podcast up, guys.
We're bullshit. What do you mean?
He's past his bedtime.
We can stop recording and then we can bullshit.
No, this is all part of the podcast.
No, it's not. You're cutting this shit out.
No. Yeah. Okay. So let's bring the conversation back then. Party pooper, AJ. Okay. So we talked about a lot of things that influence better quality, right? But we haven't really touched on building out the program itself, more pieces to it. So do either of y'all want to talk about different things that should be in a program, and it's like constraints to keep everything always moving forward on the up and up versus staying the same or degrading over time?
So, I mean, it's complicated because
I'm laughing because everyone's like, yeah, we got to talk about serious stuff.
no, it's a feat. Well, I'm just trying to figure out a good way to kind of word this, because it's all feedback loop based. You know what I mean?
Okay, so let's talk about the feedback loop then. So we have playbooks we talked about as kind of a standard you're working from. We've talked about training to kind of help people get to where they can use playbooks.
Right.
So what else would go in that? How do they get the feedback that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing? What does that look like?
That can be handled in a variety of different ways, but obviously, as you're performing quality control, you know what I mean? There should be annotations that should be documented, and then it should be ultimately reviewed with the analyst, as well as you have to be able to, it's twofold, right? So you have to be able to look at it from a collective standpoint. So collectively, you know, analysts, are they struggling with X, Y, and Z cases related to this type of technology? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where you can kind of look at it at that level, and then you can kind of look at it at a more of an individual level and work with somebody to kind of give them that feedback. So it's kind of twofold, you know what I mean, in terms of what you can actually do with the data once you have it. And then how you approach getting that feedback back to your folks is really kind of at your discretion. What I've always found is to have, you know, one-on-one sessions, even like a panel, if you will, of senior members where we can all kind of collectively get together and then sit down with an analyst to kind of discuss some of the finer points and stuff like that. Yeah, it just depends on what feedback you're trying to convey, or who you're trying to convey it to at that point.
So what opportunity, were you saying something, Andrew?
Yeah. Praise in public, correct in private.
Yeah, that's a very military thing. I was going to ask what opportunities are available that you've seen for identifying areas for feedback. So mostly sounded like you're talking about SOC analyst work. They're working through alerts and detections. They're writing up their responses. Your leadership is going back, reviewing them and comparing them to the baseline, and then providing feedback as necessary. Are there any other areas where leaders can look to identify places to get feedback or measure against a baseline, or look for improvements in general?
I mean, it just depends on what aspect you're trying to perform QA on. You know what I mean? Each team or each function within the SOC has a prescribed function. So it would be, I mean, if we're looking specifically at like the frontline analysts, then, I mean, obviously some of the data points that you would look at would be, yeah, like you said, the triage, things like that.
But detection engineers, we haven't talked about those people. So detection engineers are the people who are writing your logic for detections that you're going to have in place as a SOC. So where would be some points? How could you, what would you measure them against? And how would you improve those people?
So, I mean, you can kind of look at the efficacy of an alert, for instance, how often it's actually led to confirmed activity. And then also, well, I say that, but I err on the side of caution if you don't have a sustainable testing program in place. And so one thing when it comes to detection engineering is you want to make sure that it's flagging on the things that it's supposed to flag on.
Yeah.
And so that's where you use chaos engineering or cyber threat detection testing. Those folks can typically kind of step in and actually provide that function to make sure that it's working properly. But if it's generating a bunch of noise, for instance, or something like that, that's definitely a metric that you can kind of utilize based upon analyst triage, the number of exceptions that were requested, allow lists, things like that. I think whitelist is no longer viable language at this point. So like allow listing and things like that.
Yeah.
would be kind of just good data points to kind of pick up on. This alert generated 15 allow lists within the last 2 weeks. Is there something that we might be able to do in terms of the actual logic to address it, as opposed to just playing whack-a-mole and constantly just putting in allow lists to ultimately eliminate or omit activity that analysts shouldn't have to see anymore? So, I mean, that's one aspect from the detection engineering standpoint. Another thing that you can kind of leverage is, like we were talking about, mean time to detect. So the amount of time that it actually takes an event that's generated post travel over the wire and get ingested into the SIEM and things like that. Those are all potential data points that you can use to either build a narrative so that you can improve your technology stack, improve your pipeline, whatever the case may be. There's a number of different things you can kind of look at it from a QA standpoint, depending on the function that you're trying to evaluate.
So something to point out here that's super important. So we've been focused a lot on the people aspect here, but you just mentioned the technology aspect. And that's a really important piece too. So quality analysis should be performed on the equipment itself. Are you getting the right logs?
Correct.
Is your stuff working as intended, right? Are we capturing the things we think we're capturing? That's really important too. So it's not just a people problem here.
Correct.
Well, it not only that, like QA applies to all areas of the business, right? Are we hiring the right leaders? Are those leaders hiring the right analysts? Do we have a good process in place? Are we establishing a baseline before we bring people in? Like, it can be applied to any facet of life as well as business, in my opinion. And going back to like the technology itself working properly, et cetera, et cetera. One thing that we haven't discussed is like how often this process needs to be reviewed. And basically a cost matrix, right? So if we're looking specifically at technology, we've all probably heard of a tech refresh. As technology improves, things get lower cost. You get more RAM. Back in the day, a computer was the size of this room, right? Now, like, you can have terabytes on a thumb drive. So there needs to be a plan not only to address whether or not the quality is not being met, but what happens if it's not met, and how do we, bring us up to par in that circumstance, right? So whether it's setting aside a particular amount of funds or allocating, this year we're going to do a tech refresh. We identified we need X number of servers. They're at this amount of money. Do we want to go this route, or do we want to go this cheaper option, which will give us this baseline that now we're operating from, but we keep money and maybe we hire another individual? Like, is the quality worth it in that regard, or are we just going to toss money at it because we have that ability?
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I mean, cost always comes into play with everything, and you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. Are we going to get more out of investing in the technology or the people?
Right.
Yeah. And you have to kind of use that as a leverage.
Cost benefit analysis.
Yeah. Can I get more out of this one or that one? Yeah.
And we're getting into a time period where it's getting harder and harder to make that determination for organizations. So, I don't envy anybody in that position.
Yeah.
Well, let's think about it. Should we buy a SIM or should we build a SIM?
Oh my gosh, stop.
Yeah. Let's not go there. That's sore. That's a sore subject altogether. When you have disposable income, when you have more money than you know what to do with.
More money than sense, as my mom would say.
You can consider options like that. But I can assure you that the industry has a number of different companies that have spent countless hours and development resources creating products that could very well meet your needs. So do your due diligence is all I'll tell you from an organization standpoint when it comes to products.
Well, it all comes to like outsourcing, right? That's your job when you're looking at outsourcing. Can someone do this faster?
Right.
Outside, right? Like if their whole premise, like pen testing, right? Like, is it better for you to stand up your own team? Is it worth that cost? Do you need enough, cyclical pen tests? Do you need that expertise always on staff? Or do you just need them for a short period of time? For a SIM, or if you're thinking about building one, is it going to take more time to get one stood up? Is it going to be the same quality as purchasing it externally. Sure, there are other things to take into account, like risks, like certain risks, right? Like, even when I'm programming, I think about that. Do I want to import this library and use it? Or do I just need to code this little bit and do it myself versus having to deal with these imports and updates and all this other stuff, whatever comes with it? I'm very minimal whenever I code. I don't want to use other people's stuff unless I really have to.
Precisely, yeah.
Because there's a lot of risk and a lot of overhead that comes with it typically. It has to be worth the cost of including it. But that's the same with everything inside an organization. Buy it or build it. And you always have to make that determination.
Absolutely. I think some of the costs that people fail to take into account in that scenario in particular is just the maintenance of the product, right?
It's a huge cost maintenance.
Big issues that we run into is just the idea of set and forget. Even when it comes to tuning products within an environment, a lot of times you just kind of turn it on. They've got out of the box detections, let it go ham, let it go wild, man. So it's just, you got to be super careful.
I roll my eyes because people always buy something, turn it on, like, and it's not working.
Yeah.
And they don't know.
And we covered that in another episode. Something else to consider too is when bringing on more people, hopefully what you want to see is a ramp up in value, right? Because they need to get through the business processes. They need to build an understanding and comfortability with the environment, because we know this, but some people might not know. It's all about the implementation. So just because I have a Cisco firewall and Mike has a Cisco firewall doesn't mean that when we hire DJ to come work on our products, we have the same configuration. And so we can't expect the same outcome in a lot of times, right? So people, you should expect a ramp up. I would say it's probably similar with products in that you should have a higher initial ramp up, but then you should still have some gradual increase in value. And if not, then you should probably reevaluate that solution, which is something that, like Mike, we've done before, looking at different products, trying to get new capabilities. And
I mean, that's always the trade-off. How long is it going to take for my people to be able to use this tool efficiently?
Correct.
That's a huge cost you have to consider. I've been in so many organizations where we get new stuff, and their people are so, especially for people who don't adapt well. If you have a bunch of people on your team like that, it takes I'm gonna throw some shade at my dad a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Well, he's older. I mean, he's like past 60 and he's still hacking stuff. I mean,
it's fucking awesome.
Kill it, man.
Yeah.
But it takes him a while. Like if you introduce something new, a new tool to him, it's going to take him a while to learn it. Like for me, I'll look at the man page, I'm good, let's roll.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes him a while. But there's a lot of people like that, and just not older people, but just people in general. It's going to take them a while to get used to this thing, which means they're not using it well until they get to that threshold, whatever that threshold is. Like I remember using Carbon Black in multiple organizations I've worked at, and there's quite the ramp up for it. And same with any type of SIM. You said SIEM, but I say SIM.
Same SIM.
Weirdo.
Same difference. SIEM. Yeah, SIEM. So.
But there's usually a learning curve there, especially so in the first SOC I worked at, we worked with every major SIM. So we did Elastic, Alien Vault, ArcSight, QRadar, Splunk, you name it, we were using it. And some of them were much easier to learn than others. You know what the most difficult one to were? Actually, take a guess. No, one of the easier ones. ArcSight Logger specifically.
That's fair.
And guess the other one.
McAfee.
No, that was the easy one.
I don't know. We'll just go with CrowdStrike. Why not?
CrowdStrike isn't a SIM.
Oh, we're
ER, SIEM, SIM,
I thought we were just talking about
all the same
random stuff.
Cybersecurity.
Splunk.
I wanted to say Splunk, but I just I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah, so those were the most difficult. And so what we would see, because all of our alerts came into the same queue. And so you could see based on the customer's name, you know what type of SIM they had. And so the new people would avoid those because took a while to ramp up to.
That's fun.
But that's the same thing, right? If I have 10 SIMs I have to learn, efficient wise, I'm going to learn the easier ones first.
Right.
And then I'm going to spend, 5 times the amount of time to learn the more complex ones.
Absolutely.
Even though I will say, if I had to choose, I would pick Splunk probably Splunk out of all of those because of the flexibility I have with it and the things I can accomplish with the query language itself.
Yeah.
But it takes a while to learn that. And it's taken me years of practice and playing to learn those things and get good with it. It doesn't happen overnight. But that's just like an example of time it takes to get good and what happens when you add that friction in place. People will go back to the old way and refuse to use the product for a while. A lot of people do that actually. Like, I'm going to do it the old way. I'm not going to use this new EDR tool or the search capabilities because I have my SIM I can use instead.
Yeah.
But you're adding friction to the process. Most people skirt around that friction if they can.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this goes back to just that idea. I don't remember if you remember the NSOC 101 training that we did, but just the 3 Fs, right? Familiarity, flexibility, and functionality. So just being able to you have a ramp up period where you're familiarizing yourself with the tool to the point to where you're functional. And then you get to the point to where you're so versatile with the tool that you now become flexible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it takes, like you said, years to get to that flexible standpoint to really understand how to utilize this product in a way that gets the best bang for its buck, essentially. You know what I mean? The optimal utilization, essentially. And so it takes a while to get to that point. You know what I mean? And when you have situations with companies that are constantly changing out the technology stacks, I mean, you see what kind of issue that can kind of create for folks in the organization.
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine having that many SIEMs though to have to deal with on a daily basis, just because even with just Elastic and Splunk and other different query languages that you have to learn and all the different functions that they contain within them, you know what I mean? So it's like you discover one thing and then that opens up your head to 15 different other possibilities that you want to try out tomorrow. So it's fun, but it's not fun.
Well, the great thing is like learning a programming language.
Right.
All you got to know is that it's possible. And then now I just have to convert that thing to this new thing. And I can probably do it. But yeah, it's crazy. What else haven't we covered? So we've identified places, other places I want to point out too with quality stuff. So we've talked about alerts being done poorly. But that's where your red team and your pen test come into play as well.
Right.
Because you get basically real life activity that you can now use as a sanity check and say, hey, are my detections working? Because this should have fired because of this technique.
Right.
Did it or did it not? Okay, they used a new one. So how do we build something to catch that? Do we have that ability? And that's part of that QA as well. Can we stay up to date with the latest techniques? Because that's what you want, especially red teams. If you're mature enough, most organizations aren't even close. But if you are getting a red team, they should be doing the latest type of techniques. Even with a lot of pen tests, you'll get that. I still use current stuff, especially if it's worth doing and it happens to be like the situation anyways, because it's all dependent on that and speed. Pen test is more about speed than red teaming. So, but that, I mean, what are your thoughts on using that as a gauge or using that as a part of the quality program?
What?
Pen test, red team, offensive engagements.
Oh, I mean, it definitely. So as we were talking about earlier, ever evolving landscape. You know, we're constantly in a state of reactivity. The bad guys, and that's what I always try to tell people is the blue team's always playing catch up. So it's really kind of incumbent upon your red team or any offensive capabilities that you have to be super aware and kind of be in that creative problem mindset, creative problem solving mindset in the sense that they can kind of come up with new techniques and figure out ways to kind of, again, test things. So just like in your example regarding like detection engineering, there could be a situation where a new technique comes out tomorrow that we now have to integrate into it. So you could definitely use your penetration test team, offensive capabilities, whatever you're calling it, to go in and actually test that detection to see if A, it catches a new technique, and then you can actually provide some of that feedback to the detection team or whoever's responsible for creating your detections to ultimately create something that would catch it. So you have an opportunity to simulate bad stuff without bad stuff actually happening on your network. And so for a detection engineering team, I mean, that's you couldn't ask for anything better. You know what I mean? This is a good way for me to test my detections, but also have them throw new stuff at me and new events for me to go track down and potentially leverage to build a query out for to capture or alert on this activity sort of thing. So I mean, it's definitely super important. But when I try to explain detection engineering and stuff like that to my analysts, I always try to remind them that you just go back to the scientific method. So you start out with like your hypothesis, and that's essentially what your baseline query is. So query is designed to look for X, Y, and Z activity. You know what I mean? You go through, you experiment, you test it, and that whole phase is to continuously kind of improve the original experiment or change your hypothesis. You know what I mean? And so what we've kind of created in that feedback loop is a situation where certain teams are responsible for certain aspects of the scientific method, and that, we're all kind of feeding into each other. So that's another aspect that can be incorporated into that in terms of the actual testing or experimentation phase of a science experiment, for instance, and utilizing your offensive capabilities as well as your defensive capabilities in that regard will definitely give you much better in terms of like your return on investment for your time and improving your detections in your environment. Because that's really ultimately what it is for a lot of people. They don't realize that detection engineering is a lot more maintenance too than just, creating the detections themselves. You constantly got to be able to reevaluate and make sure that you're up to speed or keeping up the latest tactics and techniques. Because there's so many instances where we'll come across rules that were related to a CVE. And so you go look and you look at our vulnerability data and it's just like, well, nobody's vulnerable to CVE. You know what I mean? It's all been mitigated. So at that point, you can actually eliminate it. So it's just really kind of taking a different approach in terms of looking at your organization holistically and kind of a bird's eye view, you know what I mean? And that's where quality assurance really kind of comes from, just being able to kind of take that eagle eye and just look at everything for what it is and how everything's feeding into each other. From a macro level, I'd say.
What are your thoughts, AJ? I know you have a bunch.
What was the question?
He's over here sleeping.
No, I'm not.
DJ put him to sleep.
Not sleeping.
My voice is soothing.
Dude, you are so boring, AJ. Can't even focus right now.
What was the question?
What do you think we were talking about? This is what I want to know.
Well, DJ talks a lot.
Say a lot without saying anything.
Yeah, I really want to know. What do you think we were talking about? Answer. Okay.
QA with detection engineering?
Answer what you think we were talking about and your thoughts on it. Let's see what happens.
I can't really go into my thoughts because
I don't have any.
No, I have thoughts. But okay, fine. You want to hear my thoughts?
Sorry, fine.
So
nice for you.
You mentioned a few things. One of which was maintenance on detections, right? There is an example that I have where one team was responsible for maintenance and they did fuck all. And so when I came in to validate detections, there were several detections that had incorrect column names or parsing had been broken and it wasn't identified because the team managing the maintenance of the detections just made sure the query ran instead of validating that the query returned the correct data and it was functioning as intended. Now, like DJ mentioned, CVE 2019. So again, there are things that are no longer necessary, right? There's also, if you have a threat intel team, you're probably going to have some sort of atomic indicators. Hopefully those are managed more frequently than what I've seen where it's just kind of set it and forget it. So an example would be a very particular attack in like 2018, 2019. We're now in 2024 at the end of it, where security groups were created in an AWS environment with a very particular name, and then they created very particular named AWS accounts as well. Now, first off, those permissions in an enterprise are not open to every account, right? It's very locked down. So the ability to, one, break into an organization, identify an account that has that access, gain access to that account to then have the authorization to create said security group or security accounts, that's a hard feat in itself. Then to name them the exact same thing that has now been publicly reported like 5 years before is virtually impossible, right? So that should be something that is reviewed and killed or removed on a regularly occurring basis.
You can't say killed, you'll get us swapped on YouTube.
No, maybe on TikTok.
Not alived. You gotta say not
unalived.
Yeah, unalived.
But another thing, we have some people who just write detections, but they don't know what the fuck they're looking for and how it impacts an investigation, right? So, I mean, be honest, DJ, like you've probably seen it where like, oh, I can write SQL, but I don't actually know what this is doing. I don't know what is occurring if this alert actually triggers. I have no idea why we care about this occurring, right?
Oh yeah, I'll do you one better. I've had a guy tell me point blank period that he had no idea why he was building this detection in particular. So yeah, no, yeah.
Reviewing detections, there was a set of detections for a network appliance that basically detected if a wireless device failed to join the network, which isn't really beneficial to anyone. And I highly doubt in a large building, a SOC would go and try to find said wireless device in a large building. Like that, the data is not useful to anyone. So we then create a tech burden to maintain that alert. And then we have a people burden if that alert triggers and it's deemed to generate a case, right? Because now we have fun things that can differentiate between the criticality of an event and raise a case or not. So there's just a lot of tech debt that I've seen. But yeah, that's my response to what I think he was talking about. You shit sticks.
Yeah, we were talking about how actually what we were talking about is how offensive security stuff can be used to help with quality.
Yeah, but
stuff.
Okay, so that
there was a lot of valuable insight though in regards to detection engineering.
A lot of stuff like that.
I mean,
that I disagree. I don't think red team should be used to validate detections. I think like if they happen to fuck up and trigger a detection, sure, but like I don't think that's their purpose, right? Just like I don't think that's pen test purpose to test detections. They're trying to break into something, and if they happen to trigger a detection, that's beneficial.
I agree they're not meant to test, but they are used to identify problematic areas of visibility, I would say. That was a very elite executive response. But gaps, identify gaps in your knowledge and your visibility.
Correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but the whole concept
here's a deep conversation.
of
Let's go.
red and blue teaming led to the idea of purple teaming, which to me was always supposed to be a symbiotic relationship. So when I hear
symbiotic, no, collaborative.
Yeah,
sure. What I'm saying is, as one side gets better, the other side should in turn get better as well. You know what I mean? I feel like
failed to see how that applies.
You can definitely get your gaps coverage, but I think from the standpoint of you're looking at it from the standpoint of you don't get any benefit out of performing this function as a red teamer or a penetration tester or whatever.
No.
To me, I think you do get benefits because it allows you to try out new techniques and collaborate with the other team to develop detections to catch the actual bad guys. So, you know what I mean? It's one of those kind of situations where it's just like, I see your point, but also like it can benefit you as a red teamer to have that relationship with your blue team so that you can potentially test out new techniques and things like that to see if it actually works or what have you. And then also, AJ, just, trying to be the good person and help your organization you should be in the mindset of trying to help the detection team find you and catch you, as opposed to trying to skirt them and just laugh in their faces.
Yeah, AJ.
Okay.
But that's just my personal
Don't
opinion.
know why you're coming at me when I built the fucking purple team. Anyways, what red team have you seen disclose their code to detection engineers?
That's my point. Just because that's the way it's been doesn't mean that's the way it should be.
No,
Yeah,
but
a
it
lot of
is
red
because
teams-
there's legal issues there.
Potentially.
If we're looking at it from a blue team standpoint, though, we're just trying to improve detections. I don't know what legalities were really. I mean, what lines are we
I would say
crossing?
sometimes it's not even dependent on the code, right? Because the thing we typically, as long as we know in general what technique they're doing, what we're doing with the blue side is we're able to see how it surfaces in our particular environment, whatever that environment is.
Right.
And then that enables us to be brainstorm, mastermind ideas in order to find someone else doing this in the future. Sometimes maybe we do need the code, just depends on what it is, but a lot of times not really.
Yeah.
We just need the general. Are you reflectively loading? Are you staying in memory? What are you? What type of exfil? What type of C2 are you doing? Oh, okay, you're going across Teams or whatever, or you're going through YouTube comments, whatever.
Yeah. I don't need to know what's going on under the hood.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For that to perform well. But I just think that it should be something that if the resources are available, that the red team could be utilized for. You know what I mean? I mean, if teams have the resources, they can definitely create an offshoot team within the detection team to perform that detection testing, which in an ideal scenario, that's the way it would be. You wouldn't necessarily be in a position where you have to leverage your offensive capabilities in that capacity because you've already got a built-in testing function that validates your rules.
You hear that, Mike? Ideal, my situation, not your situation.
I don't give a shit about your situation, okay? So, in summary, what these two people are saying, that you have a couple of options that you could add as part of your QA process. You could have a purple team, which helps facilitate that separation of your teams and brings those two mindsets together. You could also perform, they didn't say the term, but it is a term, a tiger team, which it is a similar mindset. You have people with different perspectives coming together to solve a particular problem. And they're not necessarily set in stone teams. They're more of a project-based team more than anything. Tiger team. Purple team is typically like a set in stone team, but tiger teams are more temporary, more project-based, more focused group on things. But I think more than anything, collaboration solves a lot of problems, because the problem you see, especially when you get into bigger organizations, or even smaller ones, because so many people have a bunch of specialties like they have to cover down. But there's a lot you don't know. And if you don't know the whole picture, you can't solve the whole problem.
Bingo.
And so you need to find a way to collaborate when there is an issue. It's a friction point in your QA process, or just any process, really, and you're trying to solve it. Bring people into the room together and let's talk about the problem. What do you see? What's the problem from your perspective?
Right.
What can you tell me about this? Can we see this type of thing? What's the functionality? Is there any functionality you think that could be used to solve this problem? So look, I brought stuff together. I summarized something for us.
It was nicely done.
Yeah. All right. So is there any aspect of QA that we haven't touched on that we should touch on before we wrap this up, so AJ can go to bed and get his full 8 hours so he can get his growth?
Just perform QA in all aspects of your life. If not, you're doing yourself a disservice.
No, exactly. Being able to go back and do retroactive analysis or retrospective, just being able to view things in your life in that capacity, I think is super important. Being able to learn from your mistakes, being in that process improvement mentality, right? Things are good, but I always try to tell my kids is, why be good when you can be better? Why be better when you can be best? So it's always kind of like having that mindset of constantly trying to adapt and get better. And kind of having, that's really what quality assurance is about, is getting better. You know what I mean? Ultimately. Yeah.
I would say too, something you made me think about while you were talking about that. A lot of executives think they can solve the problem that is cybersecurity with money.
Yeah.
Sometimes money is not going to solve your problem. Sometimes just talking and taking the time and building it in as a process as part of the culture to, hey, let's be open. We got problems. Let's talk about them. Let's work together to solve these problems.
Right.
You're saving money. It's not costing you $1 million to do that. It'll cost the time, whatever, if you want to do the breakdown of you're putting that many people in the room, but I guarantee it's going to be cheaper than buying a product.
More times than not. Yeah, I was gonna say more times than not.
And it's
yeah.
usually cheaper than hiring consultants to come in and tell you the same thing your people know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a point too. Yeah, a lot of people, executives want to spend money for whatever reason, for no freaking reason, when ask your people, and legitimately, do it in a genuine way, not in a way of, I just doing this because it makes me look better. It checks a box. It says I care, but I really don't care. But genuinely listen to your people. And they're going to tell you the same thing, probably even more than these external consultants that don't know all that under the hood stuff going on.
I see.
Yeah. You hire someone, I guarantee you within 1 to 2 months, they're going to have a lot of problems they've identified off the rip, probably.
Yeah.
Just don't tell them to shut up. Say, tell me, what did you see?
Exactly.
Yeah. There you go. We're saving you money today on C-Suites. Cool. All right. Well, we can end it at that. We hit 2 hours. Hey.
What?
Cool. So, in summary, AJ's going to tell you the summary, even though he didn't listen to most of it. Go ahead.
We talked about a lot of shit that wasn't QA like we normally do.
Yeah.
Are we still recording or no?
Yeah, we're recording, mofo.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you stopped recording when you said we wrapped it up.
No, I think he was asking you to summarize.
Yeah, you usually take notes, but I know you didn't because you haven't been listening most of this episode. So wrap it up for us. So I like hearing your creative attempts to fill in gaps.
All right. Stop. Why are you fucking laughing, dude? Right when I was about to talk. Now you got to cut this section out.
No, I'm leaving it.
Chimpanzee, motherfucker.
One take. That's all we're doing.
Got Tourette's, people.
All right. So in summary, quality assurance is different than quality control. If you need an example, quality assurance says you should be this level. Quality control says you didn't hit that level. Therefore, you now have to go on a coaching plan. Just an example, not particular to anyone.
Good Lord.
Quality control in a quality assurance process can be applied to every aspect, including your everyday life. It can help save you money as well as identify problems. And hopefully, as part of that process, you're identifying the lessons learned or the root cause, and then sharing that knowledge out across your individuals so that if that outcome or that problem is met again, you have a better chance of achieving a better outcome, or maybe even just a more efficient outcome because you've already experienced that problem. We also discussed how offensive security teams can also enable your detection engineering programs, how detection engineering and SOC analysts need to work together, as well as kind of rely on each other, right? An analyst needs to tell the detection engineering team, hey, this alert sucks. It's generating 60 million events in the last day that we enabled it. So then it needs to be reviewed and looked at. But the overall message of today's podcast is infiltrate the dealer, find the supplier.
Don't stick stuff in electrical outlets.
And assure all the quality.
Cool.
Assure all the quality.
All right, everyone. That's it for this episode of C-Suite Cyber. You can check us out on social medias. We'll put the links below in the description here. So we're on, what are we on? You're our social media guy. Are we on X? No, we're not on X. Are we?
We are on X. We're on X. Oh, we're on TikTok. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, all the things. LinkedIn. Follow us on LinkedIn or YouTube. That's probably where you're going to get the best bang for your buck.
Yeah. AJ does a lot of thought leadership on LinkedIn. So make sure you go there and sign up for his thought leadership. And, but no, legit, we drop a lot of shorts. We'll start doing some shorter snippets, like 5-minute snippets of cool sections of these. But yeah, connect with us on there. Again, our sponsor is Tandem Cyber Solutions. podcast.com/C-Suite Cyber. Let them know we sent you there. And until next time, see you around.